I'm here with Bob Ward, and what's your title here at Mountain Water Company?
I'm the Superintendent of Operations.
And could you tell us some pros and cons, like on the aquifer that's our sole source here in Missoula?
Okay, the aquifer here is the supply of drinking water for about 70,000 people in the Missoula Valley. Mountain Water supplies about 50,000 of them from 32 wells around the valley. The aquifer itself is like an underground river that flows from the Clark Fork to the Bitterroot under Missoula. And the aquifer itself is from about at the ground surface to 50 or 60 feet below the ground surface here in Missoula. And it's a sand, gravel, and boulder aquifer. There's no lens of clay or anything to protect the aquifer from any kind of pollutants that might be dumped on the ground surface. And the aquifer, because of this highly porous material, is very productive. We have wells that will pump up to 7,000 gallons a minute out of the Missoula aquifer. And also, on the flip side of it, because of some of the past dumping practices and some of the current problems we have with storm drains and septic systems, there's a high potential for pollution of this aquifer. The problems come in for anything that goes in the storm drain or septic system. There's nothing to intercept it before it hits the groundwater supply. This could represent about anything. It could represent a pollutant or nutrient or just a general flow. What I've done is put food coloring in here, goes down into the aquifer, and the way this works is the pump on that side represents the Bitterroot River, and the natural gradient, the Clark Fork's higher than the Bitterroot, so the flow is in this direction, and you can see the food coloring moving across. Right here, for instance, if we had a well that was in the line of where this contaminant was moving, if it was running, has a potential to draw that contaminant into the water supply. You can see, hit it about right when it was going by, turned this instantly green from the food coloring. The potential contaminants that we've had, the main one of concern right at this moment for Mountain Water is the PERC dry cleaning solvent that we've detected in 14 of our wells, and the levels we're finding are in the barely detectable up to, I think the highest we've seen is about 8 parts per billion of PERC in the water supply. And the source of this is it's used as a cleaning solvent in dry cleaning industry, and it's also used as a degreaser in automotive plants. We don't know what the source of it is or how long it's been in the aquifer, if it's something that's going to pass over a few years, but we believe because of its chemical properties that it's something we'll probably be detecting for quite some time. We're regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is administered by the state of Montana for EPA, and there's a required list of chemicals that we're test for and have to make sure we don't exceed a maximum contaminant level for. And PERC is one of those. The maximum contaminant level for PERC is 5 parts per billion. And we've shut down 2 wells because they've exceeded that. We have one well that part of some years has been above that 5 parts per billion, so we don't run it. We test for about 60 volatile organic compounds. We've also tested for some of the other chlorinated compounds that are beginning to be regulated, and we haven't detected any of those other than the PERC in the water supply. We also check for arsenic, lead, a lot of the metals and inorganic things. We test all of our wells once a month and around the water system 60 times a month for bacteria, coliform bacteria in the water supply. We are working right now with the city and the county and city county health department on a wellhead protection plan and a water quality district, which will encompass a lot of the things that you'd asked me about protecting the aquifer, trying to reduce the number of pollutants that existing industries are using, trying to encourage better methods and better disposal methods. You know, we encourage the people to connect to the central sewage treatment facility so that you know, the waste isn't going into the aquifer. but we're not directly involved in the review process. Okay, around the wells, most of our wells are in, our big wells are down in the downtown area of Missoula, right in the commercial area, and a lot of our smaller wells are in residential areas. And as far as any kind of zoning or requirements to for different industries to be allowed to work in there, there aren't any at this time. No, there's no kind of setback standards that say your well has to be 300 feet from a feedlot or whatever. You know, there's the way they do their requirements are we monitor at the wellhead. So if there's pollution at the wellhead, it'll be detected there, and then then you're backtracking looking for a source.
And would you close that down in a case of emergency and stuff like that, or what's your procedure if you see a big spill or something like that?
Okay, we actually tested out our emergency procedures 3 years ago. We had a lift station by the university overflowed and contaminated our biggest well, and we ended up issuing a boil order for the south side of Missoula because of that. We detected the coliform bacteria in the well itself. We shut the well down immediately, and it ended up being shut down for about 4 months. You know, after it came clean of coliform bacteria, we found the source, and the source of the sewage was repaired. We flushed the well before we put it back online, and that's when we began chlorination of the water supply as a second barrier to prevent problems with bacteria.
So you'd say the main source of contamination, or the one that's most likely, would be a sewage line or septic tanks, or?
Not so much the central sewage sewer mains, but more the storm drains that you find on the corners of every street most of them go directly into the aquifer, the rest of them go into either the Bitterroot or the Clark Fork. But the areas west of Reserve Street, the Linda Vista area, is unsewered right now, so those septic systems are leaching coliform bacteria and nitrates into the aquifer. Mm-hmm. This is an aerial photo of Missoula, and you can see the Clark Fork River coming through East Missoula and down through downtown. Here's the University of Montana, Larchmont Golf Course, Kelly Island, and the confluence of the Bitterroot and the Clark Fork. The flow of the aquifer on the south side of the Clark Fork comes through Hellgate Canyon, and it flows in a westerly southwest direction into the Bitterroot. So contaminants that would get in the aquifer in this area would end up flowing through town. Right here is Reserve Street, and the majority of this area west of Reserve Street is unsewered, and the aquifer is fairly shallow, and that's the area that has some problems with higher nitrate levels and coliform bacteria in some of the wells. Also a small area out in Linda Vista that the county is going to extend the sewer into that area to take care of the nitrate problems. If we had a major emergency that we had to shut down a large number of our production wells downtown over the summer day, our backup supply is Rattlesnake Creek. We still maintain the diversion works up there and the lakes up in the Rattlesnake Wilderness as an emergency supply for Missoula. We had something like you were talking about, a major spill in the canyon or right at where Hellgate Canyon comes through into the Missoula Valley. We could put the Rattlesnake supply back online. We've seen from studies that have been done on it, the flow-through rate is about 150 billion gallons a year, and we pump from 7 to 10 billion gallons a year. So we're not depleting the aquifer, but because it just, we're talking about how porous it was. And so there's a huge amount of water down there, and it flushes itself fairly quickly. But as far as exact time, how long it takes to get from the Clark Fork to the Bitterroot, I couldn't tell you.
And then rocks, that helps the cleaning process of it, I guess?
Yeah, the sand, gravel, and rocks that are in the aquifer are a real effective filter, especially for removing leaves, twigs, dirt, sediment, and bacteria. The chemical constituents that we're concerned with generally aren't removed by the aquifer. They might be trapped in certain places or dissolve into it, or if it's something that's heavier than water, it could sink to the bottom of the aquifer and just rest on it in a pool and slowly dissolve into the water. Main advice I give to consumers is to consider the kind of household products that they're buying and try to buy as environmentally safer products as possible. The second thing I'd say is if the 32-ounce size is on sale, but you only need an 8-ounce size, buy the 8-ounce size, because that other 24 ounces are going to sit underneath your sink for years and years before you get around to using it. So I'd say that's the other bit of advice, is buy what you need and not overboard. This is something that we got that shows how to dispose of typical hazardous waste that you have in your house. And we'd certainly be glad to share that information with people, or to put them in contact with the folks that printed this. Depending on where the regulations go, if we stay with the groundwater supply and the current comparison of costs, a treatment plant on the rattlesnake isn't cost effective. If the regulations push us to something where we have to treat at all of our well supplies, that's when we have to reevaluate the rattlesnake as a supply. But, definitely conservation efforts save us from having to drill new wells or look at a treatment plant. And so any efforts that consumers can make to save water is definitely beneficial.
We're here with Bob Ward, Chief Engineer, is it?
Superintendent.
Superintendent, I'm sorry. Superintendent Engineer of Mountain Water Company, and we'd like to thank him for his interview and his words of wisdom.
I appreciate you guys stopping by, and if you have any other questions, just give me a call.
Thank you.
Well, my name's Alan English. I'm an environmental health specialist for the City County Health Department, and there are several specialists in our office, and each one tends to have a different area, and mine happens to be water quality. So
now you're talking about if there was a spill or some kind of a major crisis. We were told that if there was a problem, say a train was going through the canyon and they were carrying pesticides or something, and there was a problem with that and got in the Clark Fork, it would contaminate the whole thing, and Water Mountain Company said they would have to close off their wells. What would you do in that?
well, a case like that, that'd be a major disaster for the community of Missoula, and that's definitely a possibility. Whether they would have to abandon all the wells, certainly they wouldn't have to abandon them immediately. Some of the wells further from the source would be, probably be okay for at least a year, and some of them probably would never be impacted, but it'd wipe out a major portion of the aquifer if it happened around Hellgate Canyon. And if it was something that was a spill that we couldn't mitigate, and it actually got into groundwater in large quantities, there wouldn't be a whole lot we could do. It'd be a loss of a resource.
So what do you do to prevent things like that from happening?
It's pretty hard to prevent an accidental spill. The only thing that Missoula County has going for it right now is that we have one of the best hazmat teams in the region, so we do have some response capabilities. We have equipment such as pumps and booms and things to try to contain spills and try to protect the aquifer and other sources. And that's one of the duties of some of the people here in the health department, is that they're on that team. So whenever there's a spill, one of us would go out and respond with the fire department and the hazmat team to basically supply advice as far as environmental protection. But beyond that, the Hellgate Canyon's a major interstate route. We can't necessarily restrict that kind of travel. And there's Department of Transportation regulations that protect us to some extent as far as labeling, but if we have a big incident like that, there's not a lot we'll be able to do.
Now you say as a local, you're not able to address some of the threats. What are you able to address?
As far as Superfund, or as far as Milltown, or in general?
In general.
Well, see that the role of a local health department, in the traditional sanitarian has changed a lot. So 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this type of an office is mainly specifically looking at public health as far as food sanitation, safety of milk, public water supply, sampling and testing the water, making sure that the water that you drink in the restaurant is safe water. And those are all sorts of things that we still do. Sanitation, making sure people have garbage service, studying outbreaks and spread of disease. And a lot of those things aren't specifically related to water quality, but they can be. There's certain waterborne illnesses that could potentially affect Missoula. So our roles historically have been a lot different. Traditionally a sanitarian hasn't been on a hazmat team, or hasn't done inspections of underground tanks, or hasn't looked at some of those bigger issues of how do we protect an entire aquifer. And it's if we're going to protect the aquifer in Missoula, it's going to take a lot more effort than just the local health department, certainly. So if the water company was to come to us and propose, well, we're going to start using Rattlesnake Creek, and then we've got 2 wells over the north side, we're going to use those. We would just make sure they did all the testing and monitoring to assure that those new water supplies were safe. And that would be somewhat separate of looking at the spill side or trying to deal with the remediation at the same time. And we'd also be advising the public. We'd have a role as basically public relations to inform people of what the threats are, try to mitigate some of the unfounded threats, try to assure people that the water they're going to drink is going to be safe.
Do you let them know of the potential hazards, or basically if there's a crisis, then people are going to find out about things?
Well, we certainly try to let them know about the potential hazards. I guess if you read some of the letters to the editor, you'd think that maybe we didn't. And the arsenic scare this winter would be a good example of that. There's probably a lot of arsenic in our environment to start with, more than we realize. The same liquid de-icers they were using 2 years ago had arsenic in them, and the fact was nobody really looked for them. So we tried to be a little bit progressive and take a little closer look at the de-icers from an environmental standpoint, and we found arsenic. And whether or not that's a threat is still to be determined. It probably isn't in the long run, but the public perception was that all of a sudden we're dumping something on the street that is lacing the aquifer with arsenic, and we get a lot of calls from people that are saying, well, I'm breaking out in hives and I think it's the arsenic, whereas in fact it's something that's been there the whole time, we just never realized it. So I would hope that's an example of finding a problem and letting the public know about it early, even though we may end up getting a little pressure back from the public for allowing it to happen. At least we've brought it up. And I think we're doing the same thing now with things like storm drains, where we know the potential threats are out there, we know people dump stuff down the drains, and we're trying to bring that to people's attention and trying to educate them before it becomes a real problem. Because it's another case where somebody could dump, could just as easily have a truck wreck right in downtown with the truck hauling pesticides, and could go into one of those drains and have the same effect. So people need to realize when they see those things that they're basically direct routes either to surface water to the aquifer. If you, let's say you saw Joe's garage dumping solvent down a storm drain, or he dumped it out back all the time, if you report that to us, then we can follow up on it officially as a complaint. It actually helps us a little bit, because then we have a little bit more authority to come onto a property and say, we're here because we have a complaint. We do have the general authority to do an inspection, but it helps if you've already got a target or reason to be there. That would be the first process. Now, there are certainly times where we may get 10 or 20 complaints in a day. So internally we have to kind of weigh them too. And we do, quite honestly, get a lot of invalid complaints where somebody's mad at a neighbor and they call and say, yeah, he's got 20 barrels of hazardous waste out in his backyard, and we go out there and it's 20 bags of leaves. But what we end up doing is trying to respond to him kind of on a priority basis. And if you didn't feel like your complaint was answered, then probably the next step would be to do it one more time. And then if that didn't work, to call the county commissioners and just kind of go over our heads and get somebody else's attention. But normally, if it was anything real serious, an initial complaint would be enough for us to go out. And that probably, you know, is actually another answer to what kind of role the health department can have, you know, in protecting the resource. And that's, rather than, you know, wellhead protection as an ordinance has been kind of held up. And one of the main reasons for that is because this office directly, especially our supervisor, worked very hard to push legislation that allowed local government units, health departments basically, to create political boundaries, political water quality district boundaries. And that legislation specifically gives you not only the authority to create the boundary, but also to pass rules and regulations. So, and that legislation was passed, and we're just now in the process of forming the district and going through the official approval. But, you know, there's a case where, as a department, you know, we'll have a separate water quality district team. Basically, it'd be 3 people, or it'd be nothing but water quality. But specifically, we have a political boundary, and we can actually make a rule now. You know, the health department in the past has somewhat limited authority. Mainly what we end up doing is trying to enforce everybody else's rules. And so what we'll be doing in this case, you know, right off the bat, probably one of them will be developing an ordinance that makes it, you know, flat out illegal to dump anything into a storm drain. In the past, when we catch people doing that, we have to cite them under the litter law. And we don't have anything direct, so so that district is going to have an impact on how this office works on water quality issues, and probably how we relate to a lot of other programs. And then specifically within the district is where we'll implement the wellhead protection program. So that's been one of the reasons that's held up, is because there was some concern that if we push too hard for one, we might not get the other, and it's just been a matter of timing. And the feeling was that it'd be better to form the district and then come back, and then within the district pass the wellhead protection ordinance.
Well, I'd like to thank you for giving us this time to do this interview, and it's been very informational.
Sure, you're very welcome. Feel free to come down anytime.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Jim Leiter, and I'm glad that you're here today. I'm the landfill manager and also the environmental manager for BFI's operations. We have a landfill in Missoula, and we have 3 hauling companies, one in Missoula, one in Billings, and one in Miles City. And we have a medical waste business that we run in Miles City and Billings as well.
You're handling or dealing that is, do you accept any, if it's mentioned, and then do you have any correspondence with, say, Spokane that takes hazardous waste?
Okay. BFI is actually more restrictive than state and federal law allows for hazardous waste acceptance. One of the weaknesses of federal law has been that in the process of developing hazardous waste regulations, they had to start with the big generators first, and they left a lot of small generators virtually unregulated. For a number of years, under the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, a generator could generate 1,000 kilograms of hazardous waste a month and dispose of it in a municipal landfill site. They've changed that now. They've lowered that as of 6 or 7 years ago to 100 kilograms a month per generator. But it's still legal for a generator who generates 220 pounds a month to bring you that much waste to a municipal landfill site and to deposit it in there. Given the fact that most of Montana's landfills have never been lined at all, that's a travesty. I think that's a shame that it isn't better managed. BFI is more restrictive. We don't take any quantity. We don't knowingly take any quantity of hazardous waste other than household quantities. Commercial businesses, body shops, for example, or automotive repair facilities, we work with all those generators to make sure what they put in our containers is not hazardous waste. There's a lot of special wastes, which are other than garbage kinds of materials, sludges, floor sump cleanings, sludges that come out of floor sumps and things like that, that we work on a case-by-case basis with generators to make sure that what they have is not hazardous and that we can take it here. And we go through a special approval process to watch that. We watch for hazardous waste a number of different ways. All of our charge customers annually sign a certificate that says they know we can't take hazardous waste and they won't bring them to us. Every customer that comes through the gate signs a receipt that says, I'm not bringing you hazardous waste. Occasionally still, a customer will leave and we'll find something up top there, the little present that they left us that they couldn't get rid of elsewhere. And by having a description of the vehicle and a name on a receipt, we've been able to track them down and give it back to them or help them with appropriate disposal usually.
And like car batteries?
Yeah.
Do you expect or accept those?
When the residential trucks find them on a route, they set them back out and leave a little tag that says you can bring them here or take them to the recycling center. If people come here with them, we have them set them out there and they go to Montana Recycling and get recycled.
Maybe you could tell us about the blue bag recycling program that you sponsor.
Okay. Missoula, as you're aware, is a really environmentally minded community, and there's a lot of requests for some kind of a recycling program in town here. Curbside recycling programs generally cost quite a bit of money to operate. There is one curbside recycling program in town here, and I think Missoula Valley Recycling, and I think they charge $5.20 per month to come to your house and pick up recyclables twice, I believe. We wanted to provide a recycling service of some kind to our customers at no charge if possible, so we started the Blue Bag Recycling Program. And each customer can buy bags at the groceries or at hardware stores or department stores. We officially take newspaper, tin cans, and aluminum cans, and you can either commingle them in the bag or put them in separate bags, throw them right out with your trash, and we separate them at the curb, bring them in here, put them in big bins, and then Montana Recycling comes up about twice a week and picks up those bins and recycles those materials. We only officially take 3 recyclables, but we find that we get a lot of other things. We get a lot of cardboard, we get a lot of glass, we get a lot of polyethylene containers, pop bottle containers and stuff, and we take those and recycle those as well. The original program, we were going to absorb the cost of the recycling program and donate the proceeds from the recyclables to the county. In the first month, 2 years ago that we did this, we sent a check for $30 to the county. Since then, it's actually cost more to separate the stuff than the recyclables, that we can get out of the recyclables. So it's actually costing a little money to operate, but it preserves landfill space. It gives everybody the opportunity to recycle. You don't even have to be one of our customers, because you can do the blue bag program and bring the bags here and we take them for free. So we have it's not a boomer recycling program where we're taking big volumes of waste out of the waste stream, but it's fun, it's easy to do for a lot of people, and most people like it really well.
Do you have to go to like certain conferences and stuff over the year that BFI provides?
We get audited to death by the company. They do environmental audits. We have an environmental team that regularly inspects us. And each year they give each of the managers a personal goal to meet. Like this year, it's 12 different things they want us to do for environmental activity at the landfill. One of those is always to attend a certain number of training courses or classes. BFI puts on a lot of stuff, but we also do a lot of outside training. We both take it and give it. And we try to be real active with community groups. Like I'm on the Water Quality Advisory Group here. I was on the Missoula County Solid Waste Task Force. And we try to participate in a lot of those things. And those are usually pretty good educational opportunities in themselves. This is a photograph in October from November of last year, which kind of gives you a general view of the landfill. The part that's disturbed, as you can see it here, is all unlined landfill, just like every other landfill in Montana and many in the country. And what we're doing now is trying to update the landfill to bring it into compliance with the more modern standards for landfills and more efficient and better landfilling method. So we're doing a series of 3 environmental improvements that started about a year ago. The first one is this pond that's a triangle here that you can see out the window. It's a high-density polyethylene lined stormwater pond. The purpose of the pond is to collect any water that would fall on the landfill surface and run off on someone else's property. In this case, there's a culvert under the highway out here, and any water from the landfill runs through that culvert and onto Louisiana Pacific's property. And we built this stormwater collection pond and a perimeter collection ditch a year ago in the spring to begin collecting any water that ran on the landfill. Second improvement we're making is, or we've made, is we put in a 3.5 acre, it's called a composite liner system that will go underneath the garbage that we'll start putting in here this winter, or this summer, excuse me. The pond liner was, construction that began in the fall, finished in about December when weather got bad, and now we have to connect this up to the wastewater system with the sewer line. Once we get that connected, we'll start putting garbage right on this liner. I've got a model here of what this is to show you what it's made of. It's state-of-the-art landfill lining technology, and the whole idea is to not have areas of the landfill that anything that leaks from the garbage can get into groundwater, but to contain it on a liner with plumbing in that liner so that if anything at all drips or leaks through the garbage, it gets caught in that plumbing system and gets sent to wastewater plant for treatment. The third improvement we'll make, and we hope to do it this summer. I'm still hopeful of that, but I don't know exactly when it'll start. But the old section of the landfill is filled with garbage, and anywhere you've buried garbage and it gets moist, it gives off methane gas in the process of decomposition of that garbage. So we're going to put in probably 20 collection wells drilled through the old landfill, and we'll collect all that together through a series of manifolds and do one of two things. We'll either burn the gas off in what's called a ground flare, which is a 10-foot by 40-foot high tube with the flare in the bottom of it to just eliminate the gas. Or we're negotiating or beginning to negotiate with Louisiana Pacific across the highway to possibly sell that gas. And I'd really like to do that if we can. A landfill really doesn't return much to the community. We bury garbage, but there's really not much that we can say we do that's real positive other than getting rid of a problem. But if we can start acting as a gas utility and replacing some natural gas supplies, then I think it'd be a real asset to the community. We get about 200 vehicles a day in the busy season, and we average about 1,100 yards of garbage a day that comes in through the gate here. We also have ongoing environmental things we do. We have 15 groundwater wells that we monitor, water above the landfill and below it for impact. We have methane gas monitoring that we've done monthly for 10 years. We have dedicated wells that we monitor. We have all kinds of training programs, and we handle some special waste like asbestos or contaminated soil, and so our employees all receive special instruction on how to do that. And what has resulted is that BFI Missoula here has become a sort of a regional landfill for things like asbestos. Most of the other landfills remaining in the state, which there's about 90, most of them don't handle asbestos, for example, because they don't want to train their employees to do that or handle it properly. So we get asbestos from almost all over the state of Montana. We don't keep it in a special section. Some landfills dedicate a part of the landfill for asbestos. We mix it in. Our goal here is 100 years from now, when the landfill's closed and buttoned up, that this will blend right in and look like the hills around here. And by mixing the asbestos in, we'll dedicate an area that will be good for 3 or 4 months, and then we'll move that area, because you get differential settling in a landfill. And we want it all to settle as evenly as possible and keep the contours and keep it looking as natural as possible. There's advantages and disadvantages to doing that. When you mix it in, if you then go back and drill gas monitoring wells or gas collection wells, you have to be real careful where you drill those wells so you don't drill into the asbestos. So we log, vertically and horizontally log every bit of asbestos we put in here in a logbook, so we know right where it is. Also, if we would get say an underground fire, if firefighters had to come in and we had to dig up part of the landfill, they'd be exposed to asbestos, but by keeping good records, since we started taking it, we can know whether they're in an area where they got to worry about that or not.
I want to thank you for your time, and it's been very informative. I think most people in town have no idea that the steps that BFI has taken above and beyond what is required by state law. And so hopefully this will inform the public as well as us. And again, it'll put more emphasis on how consumers can take steps in reducing waste in Missoula and contributing less to groundwater contamination.
We're speaking today with Linda Lee of MONTPIRG, and hope that we could discuss the consumer impact upon the Missoula's aquifer.
MONTPIRG, which stands for the Montana Public Interest Research Group, is an organization that is directed by students at the U of M campus, and we're located on the University of Montana campus. And basically, MONTPIRG is a vehicle for students to work as active citizens. We teach organizing, we work up at the legislature, students do internships on different issues, and one of the main focuses is our environmental work. We've worked in the past on different water quality issues, and we plan to in the future. We're always involved in some way working on water quality issues.
What do you see as the greatest consumer threat to the aquifer?
Well, I think it's our addiction to petroleum products, probably. It's hard to say what the greatest threat is, but that would be my guess. And then besides that, how we deal with sewage and how it's treated. I mean, a lot of us think that it's dealt with and we don't have to worry about it, but there are some questions, especially in Missoula, about how our treatment plant is working, that it really needs to be updated, and we are in fact polluting the aquifer at this point.
In your opinion, what do you think we can do to help disabuse ourselves of this love for the automobile?
Well, by using alternative transportation and perhaps more education. For some reason, and I'm not sure why, I suppose it's because of our history in the United States of corporations who sell gasoline and petroleum products, and corporations who produce cars and produce tires and that sort of thing have helped us along in acquiring our addiction, whereas in other countries public transportation is much more common and it's developed in a much more organized fashion. We for some reason missed out on that, and I think that our focus needs to be towards public transportation and alternative transportation, and education from a very small age about the fact that there are alternatives and that it does make sense to walk for a mile to work or to school rather than driving and things like that.
In the Missoula area, what businesses do you think pose major threats to the aquifer right now?
From what I know, dry cleaning businesses are a big one, and then gas stations and repair shops. Mm-hmm. Well, and there's Stone Container. Mm-hmm. But there are so many gas stations and dry cleaning businesses that aren't regulated the way Stone Container is. Mm-hmm. PIRG was instrumental in helping to pass the Water Quality District. We found out that the health department was trying to do that for Missoula, and so we launched a letter writing campaign and letters to the editor and that sort of thing. And so I would suggest to you that if you are aware of different things that are happening around the city, businesses that are polluting, that you would go to the health department. The Water Quality District was just passed a couple of months ago, and basically what it is, it's like a user fee. And the health department in the city of Missoula saw that, yes, we have this fragile aquifer and we need to protect it. And I think in the '91 legislature for Montana, the legislature gave the authority to cities to go ahead and develop water quality districts, because different places around the state have different problems when it comes to water. So the health department, along with Peter Nielsen, he kind of headlined the whole thing, proposed to the city council and the county commissioners that they set up a water quality district. And what happens is every piece of property is assessed either, I may be wrong on these figures, you can find out, it's either like a $9 per year fee, or depending on how big the thing is, or $15 per year fee. And then businesses, like Stone Container, depending on how much water they use and how much they discharge, they have a different fee. So for the normal everyday person, the normal citizen in Missoula, the homeowner, it's under $10. And that goes into this fund for the Water Quality District. And that fund pays for education, to educate people in the city of Missoula so that they won't pollute the aquifer. It pays for things like the watchdog type things that you're talking about. So, I mean, they may not in the past have been very receptive, but they will be now, because there's a whole system set up to deal with those kinds of things. That's why you may have read in the paper over the last 6 months or so that people have been taken to task for dumping things into the drains and that sort of thing. So it's a really major and a very, very positive move for the health department and for the city.
What critical issues do you see MONTPIRG working on pertaining to protection of Missoula's aquifer?
Well, MONTPIRG has a history of being really involved with the whole Clark Fork Superfund site, and we helped form the original MES committee, and now which is now, I guess, called the MTAC committee. It's the Milltown Technical Assistance Committee, and it's a group of citizens who are basically watchdogging what EPA and ARCO are doing to clean up the Superfund site and what the plans are. And this, of course, is a very, very long project. It's going to go on for years and years and years. And so this citizen committee managed to write a grant so that they hired a technical person who can fill them in on all the scientific data that they get. And Missoula, or MONTPIRG, has been in on that since the very beginning, helped form the group, and we're still represented. And the Superfund site and the tailings behind Milltown Dam have great potential, would have a terrible effect on the Missoula aquifer if it was released, or if there was a 100-year flood, or if the dam broke, or, So we're currently involved with that. I'm on that committee. I don't know if you're aware of the Missoula Solid Waste Task Force. Over the last couple of years, they've been coming up with a plan for Missoula to manage solid waste. They were appointed by the mayor, and they've just come out with the almost final draft. And it's been a really lengthy process, and it's been really difficult. But in there, they have some ideas and suggestions about what can be done with hazardous waste. But a lot, it's also balanced by, is the cost worth it? Would it be better to just tell people to leave it in their basements until the city gets large enough that we have some sort of a hazardous waste repository, or a regular collection a couple times a year, or something that the city can pay for, because it's very expensive? Well, if you don't have a lot of time, usually the easiest thing to do is to write some sort of letter. The Missoulian, probably the most well-read part of the Missoulian is the section with the letters to the editor. And there are so many little things that individuals can do to conserve and to make sure that they're not polluting the aquifer. So you could write a letter to the editor offering some suggestions, making sure that people know not to dump their paint down the sink, or to use as little pesticides as they can, because it's eventually going to end up in the river or in the aquifer through the drain system. You can pay a little attention to what's happening at the legislature. There are often bills that are up that affect water quality. For instance, we worked really hard on the Hazardous Waste Siting Act. As you know, there are some companies who have targeted Montana for hazardous waste burning facilities, and obviously there's a great potential for contamination of the groundwater and the surface water. with a facility like that. And so we were lobbying for very strict siting standards, and it didn't pass. But those kinds of things, I mean, if you just read the paper, you'll begin, during the legislature, you'll begin to see, and you can follow different bills that have to do with water, and write letters to your representatives about them. Another thing you can do is educate yourself if you don't have a lot of time. I mean, there's all kinds of information. For instance, at the Jeanette Rankin Peace Resource Center, they have lots of really fun books on educating your children about the environment and environmental awareness and that sort of thing. But if you have a little more time, you could always come and work with MONTPIRG, you know, or volunteer at the Clark Fork Coalition, or talk to somebody at the health department and see what they're up to. You know, I mean, it just, someone who doesn't have a lot of time, to me, it's like, it's just where your priorities are. You know, a lot of time would be 1 hour a week. If you could devote 1 hour a week to the organization of your choice that works on water quality issues, you'd be doing a lot, and that's not that much time.
Again, we are speaking with Linda Lee of MONTPIRG. If someone needed to get a hold of you, your phone number and possibly another little quick summation of what you'll be working on in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, the number up here at MONTPIRG is 243-2907, and we do have an answering machine, and we will call you back. As far as what we're working on for water quality in the next 2 or 3 weeks, not a whole lot, but we did manage to help get the new subdivision bill passed, and that was just in the paper today, so we're pretty excited about that. You might want to write to your senators and representatives who voted for that bill and to the governor and say, kudos to you for passing that very important, very, very important bill too. So just give us a call, and we want people to get involved. That's what we're here for. We're here to help citizens become active, because a democracy doesn't really work unless the people in that democracy are active. That's what it's all about. So.
That was Linda Lee. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.